There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't show up as silence. It shows up as longing. A need to reach for someone, not because they're right for you, but because they once made the world feel less empty. And when the dust of a breakup settles, that longing can disguise itself as love. But before you go back, you have to ask the harder question, not whether she still thinks about you, but whether what you're feeling is real, or just a shadow of being alone. In today's video, we're going to talk about that difference, the one that most men don't stop long enough to face. And if this message hits something real in you, subscribe to Stoic Station, like the video, and let's begin. Sometimes the hardest question to face isn't whether she still thinks about you, it's whether you truly want her back, or if you just want the feeling of not being alone. There's a subtle difference between missing someone and missing the comfort they represented. And if you don't slow down enough to separate the two, you'll end up chasing ghosts, memories, emotions, illusions, thinking they'll bring you peace. Loneliness is deceptive like that. It creeps in during the quiet moments and pretends to wear her voice. It echoes through your chest in the middle of the night, making you believe that the ache means love, that the silence means loss. But sometimes what we're feeling isn't a longing for the person, it's a longing for relief. And reaching out too soon without clarity only invites confusion. Because love born out of fear isn't love, it's escape. And escape will never satisfy you for long. You might be obsessing over getting her back just to avoid feeling the pain. That's not healing. That's avoidance dressed up as purpose. That's control masquerading as courage. And deep down, you know the difference. But there's another layer here, one that most men don't confront. What is your relationship with being single? Do you feel like a man standing fully in his own presence, or like a shadow fading unless someone else is watching? We're conditioned to believe that being partnered equals being chosen, and being alone means something must be wrong. But that's not truth. That's programming. Somewhere along the way, many men begin to believe their value is only unlocked when it's validated by a woman's attention. And that's why breakups feel like erasure, not just loss. So ask yourself honestly, when in your life did you feel most grounded, most clear, most powerful? Was it when someone was pouring into you? Or was it when you were quietly rebuilding yourself on your own terms? The instinct to run back to her often isn't about her at all. It's about the version of you that only feels alive in the reflection of someone else's eyes. But that's not presence, that's dependence. And that kind of hunger will keep you chasing women who were never meant to stay, just because they felt like warmth in the cold. Solitude isn't a punishment, it's a path. And it has something to teach you that no relationship ever could, because when you stop looking for someone to complete you, you remember that you were never broken. You were just waiting for the silence to speak louder than the noise. So before you text her, pause. Not to suppress your feelings, but to truly see them. Look at what's behind your desire. Ask it hard questions. Sit with its answers. Because if this is loneliness in disguise, then reaching out to her will only deepen the void. But if it's real, if it's rooted in peace, not panic, then you'll know. You won't chase, you'll choose. And choosing is what strong men do, quietly, clearly, without needing the world to clap for it. If solitude teaches you anything, it's this. The fear of being alone is far more dangerous than actually being alone. And once you start confronting that fear, quietly, without flinching, you begin to see how much of your past was shaped not by love, but by the terror of losing a connection, any connection, even the wrong one. That fear doesn't just keep you up at night, it keeps you in places you've outgrown. It whispers that maybe this time she'll change, maybe this time you'll matter more, maybe being uncomfortable is better than being unaccompanied. And so you stay, you rationalize, you shrink, You accept the bare minimum because the alternative, being with yourself, is something you were never taught how to do with strength. But here's the quiet truth most men don't say out loud. If you're afraid to be alone, you'll tolerate mistreatment. You'll bend your boundaries to avoid silence. You'll call it patience. You'll call it love. But deep down, it's just fear wearing nicer clothes. There comes a point when your peace becomes non-negotiable, where your solitude doesn't feel like a gap, it feels like a standard. That's when everything shifts. Because suddenly the question is no longer, will she come back? It becomes, if she returns, can she meet the level of peace I've built without her? And if she can't, then she doesn't belong. It's as simple and as difficult as that. If someone wants to be in your life, it better be a hell of a lot better than you being alone. That's not ego. That's emotional discipline. That's how you stop chasing women who bring chaos and start choosing only those who expand the calm you've already created. But don't confuse this strength with being closed off. Real clarity doesn't need walls, it needs standards. And the best way to raise those standards is by looking back at what you accepted and finally telling the truth about it. Because the quality of the relationship you had isn't just about the good memories. It's about how you felt most of the time when no one was watching. Were you happy or just familiar with disappointment? Did you feel seen, heard, chosen? Or were you always explaining yourself, hoping to be understood, waiting to matter? That's the question too many men avoid. Were you actually happy? Or just used to being ignored? It's easy to romanticize someone when they're gone, but nostalgia rarely tells the whole truth. If you were already lonely when she was lying next to you, ask yourself this: what exactly are you trying to get back? Because missing her might not mean you lost something beautiful. It might just mean you lost something familiar. And familiarity without love is just emotional gravity. It pulls you back even when you know better. So no, the answer isn't always in getting her back. Sometimes the answer is finally getting yourself back from the years you spent dimming your light so someone else could feel more comfortable in your presence. And when you do, when you reclaim that version of you who no longer fears the silence, you stop settling for being tolerated and start requiring to be truly seen. And that right there is the beginning of a whole different kind of love. One that starts with you, one that doesn't flinch in solitude, one that never begs to be remembered. And maybe that's why it felt so different with her, not just because of what she said or did, but because of how you felt when you were around her, at ease, accepted, understood. It's tempting to label that as soul connection, to think, she got me like no one else ever has. But sometimes what we interpret as deep compatibility is really just emotional safety, and that safety may have come from her doing her own inner work, not from a fated bond between the two of you. There's something undeniably calming about people who've made peace with themselves. Their energy doesn't demand, it doesn't chase, it doesn't judge. And when someone like that enters your life, it can feel like they're seeing the real you. Not because they completed you, but because their stillness gave you permission to breathe. But don't confuse that peace with permanence. Just because someone made you feel grounded in their presence doesn't mean they were meant to stay. And sometimes that calm you felt wasn't even about her. It was about your nervous system finding temporary rest in a storm it didn't know how to leave. When we lack emotional stability within, we're drawn to those who carry it outwardly. We think we're falling in love, but often we're just seeking regulation. She may have brought calm, yes, but was it because you were finally safe, or because you were finally distracted from your own unrest? That's a hard truth to sit with, but it's essential, because there's another layer buried deeper, a voice you've ignored since before you ever met her. It's the version of you who was left behind long before she walked away, the younger self who grew up believing love had to be earned. who was taught directly or indirectly that being seen was conditional. That affection could disappear without warning. That presence didn't mean permanence. So when she pulled away, or left entirely, it reopened a wound that was never about her to begin with. That ache in your chest when the silence stretches too long, that desperate urge to explain yourself, to prove you're still worth loving, that's not just about heartbreak. That's about history. Sometimes your childhood wounds are driving your craving for them. You're not chasing her. You're chasing the closure your past never gave you. And as long as that wound remains unexamined, you'll continue mistaking familiar pain for real love. You'll seek out women who reflect what you already believe about yourself deep down, that you're almost enough, but not quite. But what if the real work isn't about fixing the relationship? What if it's about returning to the boy inside, the one who never got the reassurance he needed, and giving him what no partner ever could? Because no woman can carry the responsibility of healing a man's past. That healing belongs to you, and it doesn't begin in her arms. It begins the moment you stop outsourcing your wholeness and start reclaiming your story. This is the uncomfortable, quiet, liberating path of emotional growth. The path where you stop romanticizing the person who left and start listening to the part of you that's been left behind for far too long. When you make peace with that part of yourself, you stop needing women to save you from it. And suddenly, you're no longer chasing love. You're building it from the inside out. And once you begin separating the ache of your past from the person who stirred it, something else becomes painfully clear. You may not have been as okay in that relationship as you told yourself you were. But here's the thing, when it's your pain, you rationalize it, you minimize it, you explain it away. You tell yourself, it wasn't that bad, because admitting it was can feel like failure. But imagine for a moment that it wasn't you going through it. Imagine it was your best friend. If he sat across from you and described what you went through, how she spoke to you when she was angry, how she walked away when you were most vulnerable, how you felt like you were always trying to earn her softness, what would you say to him? Would you tell him to fight harder, hold on longer, love more desperately? Or would you tell him to walk away with his dignity intact? Would you want your best friend in that relationship? That question has a way of cutting through delusion, because we're always more protective of those we love than we are of ourselves. We see their worth more clearly. We want better for them. But what if you began seeing your own heart through that same lens? What if you finally treated yourself like someone worth protecting? That kind of love, the love you give to your brothers, your closest people, that's the love you've been withholding from yourself every time you tolerated something that didn't feel right. And maybe it didn't happen all at once. Maybe it was slow, like erosion. Little moments when your gut whispered something felt off and you silenced it with hope. Little moments when you convinced yourself, this is just a phase, or no one's perfect, or she just needs time. But hope without honesty is dangerous. And the truth is, most red flags don't look red when you're wearing rose-colored glasses. They look like misunderstandings, like fixable flaws, like things you can work through if you just try hard enough. But deep down, your body remembers. It remembers the tightness in your chest when you didn't feel safe to speak. It remembers the way you rehearsed your words before bringing up something real. It remembers how much energy it took to keep things calm. Go back, not to her, but to the timeline. Revisit the moments that made you question yourself, not just the fights, but the silences. The way she made you feel small without ever raising her voice. The emotional distance that felt like punishment. The way you were made to feel like you were too much, or somehow not enough. Those were signs. Maybe not flashing sirens, but subtle indicators that your soul was out of alignment with the space you were in. Don't bury that truth under nostalgia. Nostalgia has a habit of editing the story to protect your feelings, but your healing won't come from a prettier version of the past. It will come from finally facing it without distortion. You didn't miss the red flags, you just overruled them with a heart that didn't want to give up. And that deserves compassion, not shame. But now you know better. And when you know better, you don't just walk differently, you choose differently. And this time, you choose you. And when the red flags fade into memory, when your mind starts stitching together only the moments that felt good, you start to miss something. But it's not always her. It's the idea of her, the version you created when the reality was too hard to hold. Because sometimes we don't fall in love with who someone actually is. We fall for who we hope they'll become. It happens quietly. You overlook the inconsistencies because you believe in potential. You romanticize the good days and excuse the rest as temporary setbacks. You imagine how different it'll feel when she finally heals, when she finally understands you, when she finally loves you the way you've been loving her all along. And that imagined future starts to take shape in your heart as if it were already real. But ask yourself honestly, were you in love with her or with who you hoped she would be? Because grieving a person is hard, but grieving a fantasy, that can be paralyzing. It's harder to let go of a version that never existed because it never gave you the closure that reality would have. There was no moment where she revealed who she truly was and you walked away. Instead, you stayed, hoping she'd grow into your vision, hoping you could love her into becoming the woman you needed. Are you missing her, or are you just missing the fantasy of who she could have been? That question will strip away every illusion if you're willing to sit with it. And right behind that realization comes the deeper loss, the one that cuts a little closer to the bone. Because you didn't just lose her, you lost the future you built in your head, the home, the kids, the shared routines, the quiet laughter at night, the someday moments you talked about, or maybe just dreamed about, long before they were even possible. You're mourning the family dinners that never happened, the vacations you were already planning in your mind, the version of your life that only existed in the spaces between conversations and silence. You're grieving a future that never existed, and that's a kind of heartbreak few people acknowledge. Sometimes we're not just broken-hearted because she left. We're broken-hearted because the life we were building, in our minds, in our hopes, in every late-night what-if, suddenly collapsed. And the silence that followed wasn't just hers. It was the sound of a dream dissolving. But here's the truth. If you had to create the best parts of the relationship in your imagination, then you weren't actually in a relationship, you were in a projection. And letting go of that illusion doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It just means the story you were telling yourself about what it could become was louder than what it actually was. It's okay to grieve that. In fact, it's necessary. Because once you mourn the fantasy, you make room for reality again, not the flawless one you imagined, but something honest, something solid, something that starts not in her but in you. The version of your future that's no longer built on hoping someone else changes, but on the man you've become by finally accepting what never was. And after the fantasy fades, after you've admitted to yourself that you weren't holding on to the woman, but to the hope she might become someone else, you're left with something quieter, heavier, and far more honest: the pain. Not just of what ended, but of what never even began. And in that silence, there's a choice every man has to make. Do you feel it, or do you distract yourself from it? It's easier than ever to stay distracted. You open your phone, scroll another no-contact video, analyze her last message again, look for signs, for hope, for loopholes in the silence. You trick yourself into believing that staying mentally busy is healing, but it's not. It's delaying. You're not really feeling the breakup, you're just trying to fix it. And healing doesn't look like control. It looks like surrender. It doesn't sound like a strategy. It sounds like breathing through grief. It's unglamorous. It's slow. It's the quiet decision to stay present with the discomfort rather than run from it. And that's why most people skip it. But ask yourself, are you really missing her? Or are you just avoiding the real pain of being without her? Because pain that isn't processed gets recycled. It shows up in your next connection. It turns into patterns. It colors your perception of love. And until you face it directly, you'll keep mistaking longing for truth. Feeling lonely after a breakup doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're recalibrating. Your nervous system is adjusting to a new rhythm after months, maybe years, of attaching your identity to someone else's presence. Of course it feels strange. Of course it feels cold. That's not a signal to go back. That's your heart detoxing. And sometimes peace feels foreign simply because you've been addicted to chaos. You miss the highs and lows. You confuse unpredictability with passion. And when the noise fades, the stillness can feel suffocating. But that stillness is where you learn who you are without her. It's where you remember the man you were before you needed her to remind you of your worth. Still, just because healing is personal doesn't mean it has to be done in isolation. Solitude and isolation are not the same. One empowers, the other erodes. So lean into the relationships that ground you, the friend who won't let you romanticize your past, the brother who's walked through heartbreak and came out stronger, the mentor who reminds you that this version of you, the one who feels like he's crawling, is the very same man who'll rise in time. Healing in solitude means reclaiming your strength, not silencing your pain. It means being willing to sit in the quiet, without making it mean you failed. And yes, you have to do the inner work alone, but you don't have to walk through the darkness without light beside you. You don't have to rebuild by yourself, but you do have to decide that you're worth rebuilding, that your future isn't something you lost in her, it's something you rediscover in you. And that decision, made silently and daily, is where the healing truly begins. If you've followed me through this conversation, then you already know this wasn't just about her. It never really was. This was about you, your emotional patterns, your fears, your silence, your search for identity in someone else's reflection. It was about the subtle lies we tell ourselves to avoid facing what hurts, about confusing comfort with connection and chaos with love, about clinging to a fantasy when reality was asking you to wake up. I'm not here to shame you for wanting her back. I understand it. I've seen it in men who are strong, smart, successful, and still end up broken because they gave their power away quietly, inch by inch. But what I'm telling you now is this: the man you're becoming doesn't beg to be seen. He doesn't chase someone who made him feel small. He doesn't keep reliving the past, hoping the story will end differently. He sits in the pain, listens to the silence, and rebuilds from a place of truth, not fantasy. Because if you don't give yourself time to heal, you'll repeat the same heartbreak in a new face. If you don't face the root of your loneliness, you'll keep mistaking validation for love. And if you don't raise your standards, you'll keep making exceptions until you're no longer recognizable to yourself. So no, this isn't about getting her back. This is about getting you back. Stand in your stillness. Choose your peace. Reclaim your worth. Not by being chosen, but by choosing yourself first. That's not soft. That's not weak. That's strategy. That's strength. And most of all, that's freedom. If this gave you something real to hold on to, honor it in silence. Like the video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and keep building the kind of man no one can ever take from you. Quiet strength, unshakable purpose. Keep going.